All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Essential Essence20. Join me as we look at the features, focuses, powers, and perks of the Essence20 system to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be looking at something that is more than it seems. Robots in disguise! Yes, we are finally starting our Transformers Essential Essence 20 series. Quick clarification, I guess, for this. For the Power Rangers series, I did each one of the roles as their own video. For both Transformers and for G.I. Joe, because they have roles and then focuses for each role, I'm actually going to be doing a video for the role and then a separate video either for both focuses or for each focus individually. That's how I eventually learned to do it in my D&D Deep Dives series, and it just tends to work better and easier for everyone involved, including me. So today we're going to be covering just a single role, and then the next video I make will cover either one or both of the focuses for that role. So, what role are we covering today? Well, we are going to be looking at the Analyst. Quick reminder, if you do enjoy this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super important. Now, let's talk about the Analyst. So normally, in a show like this, I will go through like the history of the role or anything like that. However, at least name-wise, Analyst is not a class in any other tabletop RPG that I have personally played or read. So I can't really give you a history of the Analyst role. However, we can talk about kind of where it fits into the idea of a tabletop RPG and the history that that position might have. So for the Analyst is by and far a support class. And what I mean by that is a lot of the perks that are built into the class are meant to give benefits either to the Analysts themselves or more often to the team as a whole. They're very, very kind of information focused, and I've told you this. I've said this before in different videos. In tabletop RPGs, knowledge is power. The more you know about your enemy, the more you're able to exploit their weaknesses and things like that. And that's really where the Analyst shines. They even have a core feature that is built entirely around the idea of just getting information that could be useful. As far as more traditional classes that would kind of fit into the Analyst mindset, there really isn't something like this class in D&D. There are abilities that kind of mimic some of the things the Analyst can do, like the Battle Master has a feature that allows them to learn something about their enemy, but the way that the Analyst uses those abilities just really can't be represented in any other tabletop RPG I am personally aware of. This is kind of a uniquely not only Transformers thing, but kind of a uniquely Essence20 thing with how they choose to use that feature. As far as Cybertronians that would fit the Analyst role, the examples that they give are Hubcap, Jazz, and Mirage. I know both Hubcap and Jazz are Autobots. I can't remember if Mirage Transformers. I can't remember if he's an Autobot or not. I think most of these are Autobots because they have an entire book on being a Decepticon. Yeah, so Mirage is an Autobot too. So, that being said, let's actually dive in to the role itself. So moving on. So first things first, let's talk about essence scores. Another thing that's kind of unique about the Transformers versus RPG, unlike the Power Rangers RPG, where your role is going to have like a defined, this is your most powerful essence score, this is your next most powerful, this is your third, this is your fourth. The Transformers roles, you will have one essence score that you get more increases to than the other ones in the base class, but your focus is also going to give you additional essence score boosts. So I can't really define what is going to be your technically absolute best essence score, but I can tell you the ones that tend to be focused a little bit more in the core class. So the one that gets the most increases in the core class is the Smarts essence score. And Smarts in general really does fit in with the idea of the analyst, the idea that they're all about learning information and interpreting that. So having a large Smarts essence score is very useful. Another thing that I constantly forgot when I was building Essence20 characters, back when I was doing designing new dragons, was the higher your Smarts essence score, the more languages you know. Which, again, languages in general in tabletop RPGs are a your mileage may vary kind of thing. In some campaigns, knowing a lot of languages is really, really useful because the DM uses languages a lot. And if you don't speak Abyssal, well, then you can't understand this, you can't read that. In other ones, everybody just speaks Common. So your mileage may vary, but for the analyst in particular, the more information that they can get, the more effective they're going to be in every aspect of them. So the fact that you can get some extra languages just because your Smarts essence score is going to be getting higher is always useful. The other thing that can be useful for the Smarts essence score, for combat. In general, most combat roles are going to be either strength or speed. Melee combat is either going to be might or finesse, which might's a strength and finesse is a speed. And then ranged attacks are almost always going to be targeting, which is a speed essence score. So there is one class of weapon that doesn't use either strength or speed, and that is weapons that use technology. The technology skill for their attack rolls. And those are generally weapons that have like targeting system or computerized or things like that. So it's generally not going to be like a handgun or something that you're using technology to aim with. A lot of times you're going, like if you have a missile system, then maybe that's what it is. You have something with a heads-up display, that might be that. There are weapon upgrades that you can get that will add the targeting, the ability to use targeting with that weapon. I think it's called computerized or something similar to that. But yeah, so that does mean that having a high Smarts essence score, if you're investing that into the technology, which there are other things in the role that use that, that might be relatively useful, or it might not really be used much for your combat. It'll be used for literally everything else you do. So yeah, Smart's big one. The two other essence scores in the core class that receive the same amount of increases are speed and social. And the two two focuses for this class both give increases to social. So technically, social is, if you choose one of the two focuses in the core book, social is either going to be your second highest or your highest as far as number of increases are concerned. And then speed would be in third place, strength would be in fourth place. Now, another thing you have to remember about the Essence20 system is speed. Your speed essence score isn't just used for, you know, your finesse weapons or your targeting or running really fast or being super sneaky or something. Your speed essence score actually dictates how many free actions you get. And as we look at the role itself and a few of the features do use your free action to do a few different things. And another thing that's really, really useful just for Transformers characters in general, because of their alternate mode, battlefields for Transformers characters tend to just be bigger. Because while their robot modes tend to have somewhat similar speeds to things like Power Rangers and stuff like that, well, they'll have like anywhere between like 25 and like 35 or 40 feet of movement. Their alternate modes can have like 60 feet of movement. And one of the role perks for all Autobots is the ability at the beginning of combat to instantly revert into your alternate mode without having to use a standard action to do that. So because of that, ranged combat tends to be a little bit more common with Transformers than it is for something like Power Rangers, where you tend to have a pretty even mix of melee combat and ranged combat. And one of the things that you can use your free action for is what's called aiming. And aiming literally just lets you upshift a targeting attack. So if nothing else, having a decently high speed score means that you're going to be significantly more likely to hit on your ranged attacks. And as we've talked about many times before with the Essence20 system, the way that critical hits work, if you specialize in an attack skill, you can use upshifts basically as a way to kind of fish for critical hits, which is very, very useful. So speed is always going to be useful, even if you're not planning on your character being an incredibly speedy thing. Social, again, has a lot of different things that you can use it for, and the class itself actually has a few different things built into it that will help you use social a lot. But again, one of the things that I really like about the Essence20 system is, and this is, I guess, true about tabletop RPGs in general, just because you don't have an attack specifically that names a social skill, you can still use social abilities in combat. And especially if you look at the Transformers cartoons, I haven't read the comics, so I don't know how often this happens in the comics, but it happens in the movies, it happens in the TV shows. They are constantly kind of communicating with their allies and with the enemy during combat. And so putting out little quips and stuff like that is kind of par for the course. And if you're a good tabletop RPG player, you might even try to negotiate with your DM as like, hey, can I use this skill to maybe give them a downshift by making them feel bad about this, or give an ally an upshift by explaining where this part, where this thing is, so they can get somewhere easier. Or even something as simple, hey, can I insult that guy so he tries to shoot me instead of my friend? You can do all those things with social, or we've talked about there's an Intimidate, I think, strength essence skill. I'd have to look at it again. It's been a while since I've reviewed all my Essence20 skills. But, yeah, so that's the Essence scores, and this is stuff like that. Moving on. The first starting role perk that all Autobots will have is called For the Allspark. In this video, this is going to be the only one that I go really in depth into For the Allspark, because it's the exact same perk for every single role. So if you're interested about how it works, this is the video for you. For the Allspark is their, what's it called? They eventually came up with a name for it. It's like Team Perk or something similar to that. My brain is not working right now. But basically all Autobots get this perk. And if you're translating a role from a different system into this, one of the things you do is you replace their faction perk. That's what they're called. You replace the faction perk, like it's Morphin Time for Power Rangers, and you would give them the for the Allspark perk to use a Power Rangers role in a for a Transformers character. So for the Allspark does a couple of things, or a few things. One, they get an upshift 1 to infiltration skill tests when in alt mode, or an upshift 2 if the alt mode is appropriate to the environment. They have immunity to carbon-based diseases, but are affected by electromagnetic damage and viruses that affect machines. They get standard issue Autobot equipment, and they get a special ability called Roll Out. Autobots, roll out! When you roll for initiative, if you're not surprised, you can choose to convert to your alt mode before combat begins without needing to spend an action. So overall, for the Allspark, for the most part, kind of defines how to use their alt mode in a number of different situations, which is the defining feature of the Transformers RPG compared to the other Essence20 systems. The alt mode is a defining aspect of the Transformers RPG, and it does make the game play very, very differently. Every one of these robots can turn into some kind of vehicle-like thing. And so because of that, it changes how you create encounters. It changes how they go around. And this increased infiltration skill tests can be really, really useful. Especially, again, for the analyst in particular. The ability to gain information without the enemy knowing that you're there, or without third parties realizing that you're there, is really, really useful. In the criminal world, they call it casing the joint. In the military world, they call it recon. Getting information before you do something is an essential part of doing anything successfully. And so, yeah, understanding that your alt modes are specifically there to make you blend in is really, really useful. And getting an upshift anywhere in the Essence20 system is always a benefit. The immunity to carbon-based diseases, for me, that just mostly is a flavor kind of thing, meaning, hey, you can't get the flu, but you can get the computer flu. It's really not that big a deal, but it can be something, at least for game masters, that can actually be a lot of fun. There's an episode of Beast Wars, which was my first Transformers series, where Rhinox gets infected with effectively an electronic cold. But the thing about it is every time he sneezes, he shoots off excess energy. And the thing that makes it dangerous is it's draining all the energy out of his body by making him like shoot it out every time he sneezes or coughs or anything like that. And he actually becomes dangerous to the base and to the rest of the Maximals because he's basically randomly firing off a particle weapon. And so they had to go through the entire episode is them first trying to figure out how to cure it, and then finding out ways to minimize the damage, and then eventually finding ways to use it to their advantage. And it's got some kind of juvenile humor in it with bodily functions and stuff like that, but it's a great interesting episode. And that's what I see kind of as this immunity to carbon-based diseases, but affected by electromagnetic devices. To me, that is just permission for the game master to come up with interesting ways to challenge the players, which is not something that really happens in D&D much. D&D, specifically 5th edition, but even if you go back to earlier, like 4th and 3rd and 2nd, diseases basically were just debuffs for you in some way, shape, or form. Either you took damage from them, or they would give you some kind of downgrade to a stat or an ability or something like that. They were really never that interesting. They were just something that could make playing your character harder. And I really think the idea, especially since with robots, we don't have to deal with the idea of, hey, we have to, stick to how actual diseases work. These are computer programs. And computer programs can do a lot of things. Viruses can do a lot of different things to your computer. They've had viruses that'll lock the computer down. They have ones that'll make it overheat. And a lot of people don't realize if your heating system is not working correctly, your processor makes enough heat that it can melt your motherboard. That's why cooling systems are so important. And I think most modern processors have fail-safes and stuff so that they aren't fire hazards. But to me, that aspect is just something that can give the GM permission to give you unique situations to deal with. The standard issue Autobot equipment. If we go into equipment and stuff in this Essential Essence20 series, I will talk about the standard Autobot equipment. But it's just like the Power Rangers, where they got a blade blaster and then a power weapon. It's the same basic thing here. If I remember correctly, you get a grenade, you get a sidearm, a long arm, and I think one of those you can replace with a melee weapon if that's the way that you wanted to do it. So not that big a deal. And then the final part, roll out. Autobots, roll out. Which is my impression of Peter Cullen's, and it's a bad one at that. This is the thing that makes playing a Transformer so interesting, because I've mentioned this before in my D&D Deep Dive series. I've mentioned it in Power Rangers. Extra movement is always useful. And in the Transformers RPG, first of all, because Transformers are bigger than humans, your maps already need to be bigger. Second of all, because they have additional movement speed, a lot of alternate forms can move faster than their regular forms. The ability to position yourself in the exact right place is really, really useful, especially if you're either melee or ranged. If you're melee, you need to be able to get to the enemy as quickly as possible so you can actually use it. And so with rollout, because you can convert to your alt form without using an action to do it, you start in your alt form, you get up to them as quickly as possible, then you use your standard action to transform into your robot mode so that as soon as your next turn comes around, you can start attacking and doing good cool stuff. If you are a ranged character, being able to get to the right spot where you can be behind cover or just have line of sight to the target that you will want and make sure that you're the exact right place is always useful. In addition to that, you can have integrated hard points on your Transformer where some of your weapons can be available to you when you are in your alt form. So again, the ability to, at the start of combat, instantly turn into your alt form gives you so many different options with how you want to kind of get ready for the combat. And the only limitation is it doesn't work if you're surprised, which again is another thing that is very useful to have an analyst around, because they have things that will make it more difficult to have you surprised. And that is another thing that playing a Transformers game, you have to kind of get used to the fact that one of the actions you can take is to transform into your alt role or your alt mode. Because I know a lot of people, simply because that's not an option in the vast majority of tabletop RPGs, they will completely forget, oh yeah, I'm also a car or a helicopter or something else. And understanding when and where to use that to be most effective is really going to help you in being able to feel useful and be able to contribute to the various things that you need to do to win any kind of encounter. So, yeah, so that's for the Allspark. Moving on. The next thing you get at first level is your Cybertronian perk. Each Each role in the Transformers RPG has what's called a Cybertronian perk. This is kind of a defining feature of the role itself, and if you eventually multiclass, if I remember correctly, feel free to correct me in the comments down below. I think the Cybertronian perk itself is not something that you could get, but I might be wrong on that. I can't remember how, if there is a multiclassing thing for Transformers and how it works. I'm more familiar with the Power Rangers RPG. But the Cybertronian perk for the Analyst is called Work the Numbers. At the beginning of every combat round after the first, you can spend an Energon point to move a creature in the combat up or down one place in the initiative order. And then the rest of it is an example. So I'm not going to read that. It's a relatively simple Cybertronian perk that has a lot of benefit. It specifically says you can spend an Energon point to move a creature in the combat up or down one place in the initiative order. So it's not saying that you can increase their initiative by 1 point or 2 points or anything. It moves them one place in the initiative. And that can be really, really impactful. A good example, you have a character that's at the very end of initiative, because this has to happen at the beginning of every round of combat after the first. You have somebody that goes at the very end of combat because they've lowballed their speed essence, or maybe they just didn't invest in the initiative skill, so they tend to go last. With the Cybertronian, the Work the Numbers perk, you can jump them up. And that means if the next person in initiative, like they got a 3 and the next person in initiative got like a 14 or something, you can jump them up effectively to a 15, because they're going to jump up at least one place in an initiative. It also means that you can basically break up blocks of enemies going at the same time, depending on how your GM treats enemy initiative rolls. So if there is a situation where every time this block of enemies goes, they all go and swarm the same target, and like 3 attacks all without any way to interrupt them or do something in between is really hurting, you can just go, okay, well, I'm gonna put this particular person in between these 2 enemies, so now we have something different. Also, I can't remember if there are any abilities that last until like the end of your next turn or your start of your next turn. Abilities like that can be manipulated by something like Work the Numbers. Because let's say you've got your Analyst and your Field Commander, and then your Gunslinger. Okay? And the Field Commander has an ability that until the end of their next turn, everybody gets an upshift on something. I have no idea if that's an ability in this, but they had it in Power Rangers. What can happen is the Field Commander activates the ability, and then at the start of the next turn, the Analyst moves them down 1, and that means one person technically gets to benefit from that ability twice, because it lasts longer, because it doesn't end until the end of their next turn. Any ability that's built on the idea of it ending at the start of your next turn or the end of your next turn can be manipulated heavily with Work the Numbers. And just giving the ability to kind of switch where people are in initiative is a really powerful skill. Controlling when people go in initiative is useful. And again, it specifically says you can move a creature in the combat up or down one place in the initiative order. So this is not exclusive to your allies. You can do it to your enemies. So if the enemies have something like, well, it ends at the end of their next turn, move them up in initiative and make it end that much faster. There's so many different ways you can use the ability to manipulate initiative order, even with this only allowing you to move them up or down one slot. it's still very useful. And the only limitation to this is it does cost an energon point, which is the just limited resource of all Autobots or all Transformers. So it's not a hugely it's something that they all share in the same way that Power Rangers had power points. Transformers have energon points. The unique thing about energon points is, unlike Power Rangers, the only way that they could get more personal power points was either they got a daily allotment of them, or you could burn story points to restore some. Because it's based on energon, if you find a source of energon in the world while you're playing, you can harvest it to give yourself more energon points. So in that aspect, that can be a very useful thing. And again, because the analyst is really good at getting information, you'd probably be pretty good at figuring out where raw sources of energon are that would be compatible with their systems to give them more energon points. So yeah, interesting stuff. Moving on. Next thing they talk about is training, and then the equipment training and qualifications. Training, we already talked about the essence scores and this is stuff like that, and they talk about the role skills that you can get rank ups in from that to training. We don't really need to go over that. The equipment training and qualifications. The difference between being trained and being qualified is really important in the Essence20 system. Being trained in something means you can use it. And when you are requisitioning weapons, that means that you can try to use a requisition roll to get stuff that's not part of your normal kit. If you are qualified in something, there's no requisition roll, you just get to use it. So you do want to look at this section to see if they're what you are trained in and what you are qualified in, because that can massively change how you play your character. For the analyst, you're trained in standard armor upgrades, so just your regular armor stuff. And then for weapons, you're trained in one-handed weapons, including weapons that can be used one- or two-handed. So any... in D&D we call them versatile. You can use any one-handed weapons or weapons that can be used either one or two-handed. So the analyst is not really designed to be using like a big heavy sniper rifle or anything like that. They're more built around using daggers, using sidearms, things like that. So yeah, and then the next section they talk about is focuses. The two different focuses for this are the manipulator and the spec ops. Like I said, we will have videos on that. We're not going to go over them right now. So that's that. Moving on. The next ability you get at first level is Analyze Target. And I'm going to coin a new term for the Essence20 system. For Power Rangers, we had what I call the table perks or table features. And those were kind of the single ability that was connected to that role. Here I'm going to call this a core perk or a core feature because so many other things in the role will reference this or use this ability in some way, shape, or form, upgrade the ability. So the core feature of the analyst is called Analyze Target. You see the enemy as walking data fields of valuable information. As a standard action, make an alertness skill test against the willpower or cleverness of a target you can see. On a success, you can learn a valuable piece of information of your choice about them, such as their rank in a specific skill or a defense score. So this, in and of itself, is intentionally left vague. It tells you what you need to do. It's a standard action, so we understand that. It's an alertness skill test, which alertness in and of itself. Where's my? There we go. Sorry, I lost my mouse for a second there. Alertness in and of itself is a smarts skill. So again, smarts is one of your. Try this one more time. Smarts is one of your highest increase skills for the analyst. So that's always useful. Stop that. Sorry. Computer's doing weird stuff. And then it targets willpower or cleverness. Because it's not really defined here, 9 times out of 10 when you are making some sort of attack against the target, they get to choose the defense. Because this isn't really defined here, I would assume the enemy gets to kind of choose either willpower or cleverness, but I could also see this being argued that because you are analyzing the target that you could choose it as well. It'll be something that'll be up to the GM. However, the willpower and cleverness are not defenses that a lot of people think to add a lot of power to. And Decepticons in and of themselves, I guess there are a few Decepticons that are very, very clever. But willpower has never been something that Decepticons have been known for. So, and then it specifically says, on success, you can learn a valuable piece of information of your choice about them. And then the next part, it says, such as their rank in a specific skill or a defense score. So that is just an example. That is not an exhaustive list of what you can learn. So figuring out what, quote unquote, a valuable piece of information of your choice about them is going to be an essential part of playing an analyst. Knowing what information is useful, what is not. Defense scores are, for the most part, are useful really often, especially if you have other members of your team that have damage types that allow them to choose different defenses to target. Being able to tell, their willpower defense is really, really low, or their evasion is really, really high, so avoid doing things that target of evasion. That's always useful. Being able to figure out which skills they have ranks in can also be really useful, because it can kind of help you understand what that particular enemy is going to be focusing on, because in general, enemies are going to do the things that they're good at. So yeah, as much as it seems kind of limited, the very next ability that we're going to talk about actually turns Analyze Target from something that's kind of useful to something that becomes essential to the role. So moving on. The next ability at first level is called Informed Accuracy. When you attack a creature that you've used Analyze Target on in this combat, you gain an upshift on the attack equal to the number of times you used Analyze Target on them. This is a really big deal. Now, Analyze Target is not exclusively, I can learn information, which is useful. Now, Analyze Target is effectively a free aim that lasts for the rest of the combat encounter. So if you're fighting something big and tough, spending your first couple of turns analyzing it is not a bad idea, because first of all, you're going to find out information that's useful for your team. Second of all of your attacks are going to have automatic upshifts on them. Then you can apply other things like aiming as your free actions, working with other team members to get you benefits, just using the environment to get you benefits. It's really, really useful. And right now it's just a standard action, but as the character levels up, there will be other things that they can use to get these analyzed to targets in. And again, because this lasts until the end of combat, there really isn't a huge detriment to using Analyze to target. Yes, you lose your ability to use your standard action to attack that turn, but every attack after that initial Analyze to target is going to be more accurate, have a better chance of getting a crit, which could do more damage or more other effects. It makes it really, really useful, and this is a level 1 perk. This isn't something that eventually upgrades Analyze Target. Analyze Target, right from the beginning of this class, is designed to give you a benefit to your ability to attack. So, very cool. It does mean one of the choices that you're going to have to make is how often is it going to be beneficial for you to use Analyze Target instead of actually attacking. For enemies that have high defenses, analyzing them a few times is going to be useful, and figuring out which defense scores are going to be highest is going to be useful. But there may be other times where if you're just fighting like rank and file Decepticons, maybe spending, maybe using Analyze Target on them really isn't that good if you're just going to be one or two shotting them anyways, and they don't have massive defense scores. So that's a question that you kind of have to ask yourself. Is this target going to be around long enough where analyzing it either once or multiple times is going to be beneficial to me, or should I just get to using other abilities of my roll or just shooting stuff? So, yeah. Moving on. The final first level ability, Unsurprising. If you would be surprised, instead you can act, but treat your speed score as though it were equal to your level up to your actual speed score. So effectively, the higher your level, the better you're going to be when you are supposed to be surprised. I've mentioned before, one of my favorite items in magic items in D&D 5th edition is what's called a Weapon of Warning. And it has 2 perks that are really, really useful to it. You can't be surprised, and you get advantage on initiative rolls. Well, Unsurprising is basically half of a Weapon of Warning, and it's unbelievably useful. I cannot tell you how many times my Trident of Warning on my monk, who can't even use a trident, but he keeps it on him anyways, has been. So Unsurprising, again, a lot. This is another one of those abilities that your mileage is going to vary, simply because if your game master isn't using ambushes and surprise and stuff like that very often, which I know quite a few game masters that just really don't like surprises and stuff like that because it complicates the things. You may not get a lot of use out of Unsurprising. On the other hand, and it also is going to depend on your campaign as well. If you are doing a campaign where you're basically in the middle of, the Autobot Decepticon war, and most of your combat encounters are just going up and fighting against the enemy, you're not really going to be using surprise tactics too long. However, or too often. However, if your Autobots are starting to incorporate guerrilla warfare, if your particular team is not part of the frontline war, is actually going off and exploring or scouting areas, with you being an analyst, that's kind of your bread and butter, is being part of the recon to the team to get information to help the rest of the Autobots. So in that idea, Unsurprising can be very, very useful. So, yeah. Moving on. All right. So, at second level, you get Data Analyst. Second level, you get an edge on science and technology skill tests related to extracting or processing data, such as hacking into an enemy computer. If extracting or processing the data normally takes 2 rounds or longer, it takes you half as much time. So Data Analyst, again, is one of those things that your mileage is going to vary. However, this is something that I think has a lot more control by the player than it does the GM. For surprising, in order for unsurprising to work, the enemy has to try to surprise you and actually succeed in surprising the rest of your team. That's when unsurprising is working. That's something that's entirely controlled by the GM. For data analyst, effectively, you're real good at hacking and processing data. So because it's something that you actively do and your enemies are computerized and computers are everywhere and your ship is computerized, like the amount of times when a smart player could go, hey, can I try and hack this? Can I try and interpret this or do this? Is going to be pretty high if you're thinking about it enough. And it could be something as simple as, you knock out an enemy. It's like, hey, can I hack their systems and try and find out where their secret base is, or something like that. Like, all of these things are going to be useful for you. And then again, just the idea of processing data. If you are doing recon and intelligence gathering, maybe one of the things that you actually have to do is download the enemy database into a computer and get it back to headquarters. Well, if normally it would take, a few days to do it, with this perk, you can go, well, I can do it in half the time. And then the rest of your team can do downtime activities while you deal with this. So it's not entirely reliant on the GM for this to be a useful ability. It does have some things that are controlled by the player, but this is an ability that, first of all, you have to remember that you have, and second of all, it is something that you have to kind of you have to actively to try to use it if you really want to get a benefit out of it. And again, the analyst is all about information gathering and the things like that, and knowledge is power in tabletop RPGs. So I don't see really a downside to that. Just you need to remember that you have it and find ways to use it. So, yep. Moving on. At 4th level, you get General Perk. It's the same thing as all the other Essence20 things. It works the same way as feats. We're not going to talk too much about that. However, at 5th level, you get Determine Probability. 5th level, once per turn, instead of using a standard action that requires a skill test, you can use a free action to run a simulation in your head of you using that standard action. Roll the skill test as though you were actually attempting that skill test. If this simulated skill test succeeds, you can use your standard action to use the results of the simulated skill test instead of making another skill test. On a failure, you can ignore the results and use your standard action differently. So this is probably the most complicated explanation they have of an ability, but the actual use of it is fairly simple. You can use a free action to do a test run of an ability and find out if it would succeed or fail. If it does succeed, you get to keep it. If it fails, you can choose to do anything else you want. So this is probability modification, effectively. Very similar to the Divination Wizard. However, it is slightly more useful than the Divination Wizard, because Divination Wizard, at the beginning of a turn, if you're unfamiliar with 5th edition, one of these subclasses a wizard can choose is the School of Divination. And Divination Wizards, at the beginning of a day, roll 2d20s, then they save those numbers, and anytime throughout the day, they can just go, before someone rolls, they can just go, actually, I've already seen how this goes, they roll this number. It's a very useful ability. This is akin to that, where it's basically, probability manipulation, but instead of that, instead of having to pre-roll something and choose when to use it, this just lets you go, okay, I'm not sure if this is going to go well. Going to burn a free action to see how the roll goes, and if it's a good roll, I'm just going to go with it, and if it's a bad roll, I don't have to worry about it. Because you can use it once per turn, and it doesn't require any resources, this is something that as long as you have an extra free action, there's not really a detriment to using it. Now, if, again, there are other things that you can use for free actions for, aiming probably being the biggest one. And as we go through the class, we will find the role, we will find other things that you can use your for free action for. But this is a really, really useful thing. And it's just anytime you would use a standard action that requires a skill test. So this can be attack rolls. This can also be literally anything else. Anytime it takes your standard action and makes a skill roll, you can use this. So you go, hey, can I try to persuade this person to let us into this area without the correct clearance? Well, I'm going to determine the probability on that. And not only can you make the roll, but the DM or the GM has to tell you whether that roll would succeed. One of the examples in here, they talk about rolling a targeting skill test as though they were attacking Scorponok. They get a 26, and it actually doesn't beat their defense. So they realize that making attacks against Scorponok is a big waste of time. The same thing can happen here. You make a persuasion check or whatever the persuasion skill is. Again, it's been a month since I've done any Essence20 stuff. Really? I don't have any deception performance. Yeah, persuasion. And then there's specializations to it. So that's what I thought. So yeah, you make a persuasion check. You roll really high and you see that you still fail. You go, oh, not only do you know that I'm not going to do that, but you can actually tell the rest of the team, hey guys, maybe we don't want to try persuading this person. This person is really, really difficult to persuade. Maybe we want to try something else. So there's so many things that determined probability can do for you. So, yeah. Cool ability. Moving on. At 7th level, you get Quick Study. 7th level, using Analyze Target is a move action or a standard action. Again, this is why I declare Analyze Target as the core skill, because it interacts with so many other things. Informed Accuracy builds on Analyze Target. Quick Study builds on Analyze Target. And now you have this ability where if you wanted to use Analyze Target and still make it attack, it just means that you can't move that to turn. Which again, if you set yourself up in the right place, there's a lot of times when you're really not going to want to move. Find a good spot with cover in it, or cover near enough to it, and you won't need to move. You can analyze targets, take pot shots at them at the same time. The other thing that's kind of unique about this, it doesn't say you can only use Analyze Target once per turn or anything like that. So with Quick Study, you could use your move action to Analyze Target and your standard action to Analyze to Target, and basically get two analyses in one turn, which again gives you 2 upshifts on your informed accuracy against them, and depending on the information that you get, could be very, very useful in figuring out how you and the rest of the team want to deal with this creature. And I tend to focus on combat because that's the most complicated thing you're going to do. But that also means that Analyze Target can be used in social encounters to discover other things about the target. And in social encounters, you're not quite as worried about, getting to the right place and everything. So it might be the perfect time to use Analyze Target instead of your move action. If you're trying to persuade someone, analyze the target to figure out what their willpower defense is, to see maybe how easy they're going to be to manipulate. And then use your standard action to actually, or your action to actually persuade them. So a lot of different things you can do with quick study. Moving on. At 9th level, you get Pinpoint. When you use the aim action, instead of getting an upshift on your shot, you can choose to ignore one of the target's armor upgrades for each free action you spend aiming. So, a lot of stuff in this little thing. First thing, talks about one of the target's armor upgrades. Well, how do you know what armor upgrades they have? Oh, maybe that's one of those valuable pieces of information that you can learn through Analyze Target. So despite the fact that Pinpoint doesn't actually mention Analyze Target at all, it does stack with Analyze Target and make it significantly more useful. And an upshift is great. Upshifting can make it easier for you to get critical hits. It can make just your dice bigger so it's easier for you to hit. But depending on the armor upgrades they have, being able to avoid one may drop a defense score by a lot. Depending on the armor upgrades that they're using, that can be like 2, 3, 4 points that just disappear. Whereas upgrading something or upshifting something once, your average roll is only going up by 1. Like the difference between an average roll on a D6 versus a D8 is only 1 point. The average roll on a D6 is a 4. The average roll on a D8 is a 5. So yeah, being able to use Pinpoint can be very, very useful. And being able to use Analyze Target to figure out what armor upgrades they have can help you decide if using Pinpoint is going to be more useful than getting upshifts and the things like that. So yeah, again, it's another thing where you're going to have choices to make. Do I want an upshift? Do I want to avoid armor upgrades? Which one is going to be the best use of this? And it's also something that means that increasing your speed score is going to be very, very effective for this role, because aiming is always a useful thing to use your free actions for, and now it's become significantly more useful with Pinpoint and the interactions with Analyze to the target. So yeah, moving on. At 12th level, you get Postmortem Interrogation. Once per scene, you can extract information from a defeated Cybertronian. Roll a science or technology skill test against a difficulty equal to something. One of the things that I try to do in this Essential Essence20 thing is I would never want someone to be able to use one of my videos to avoid having to buy the book. So I will intentionally leave out certain things that aren't really useful for me telling you how to use the ability, but are very useful to actually use the ability. So to figure out what the difficulty class is for this, pick up the book. It's in a lot of different places. It's a great book. Renegade Game Studios have been nothing but kind to me. So, yeah. That being said, on a success, you can ask the GM a question. The GM must answer the question truthfully, but from the defeated Cybertronian's perspective. You can ask another question for every certain amount by which your result exceeds the difficulty. And like I said, if you'd like to know what that actual number is, pick up the book. It's a great book. So this is Speak with Dead. It's exactly what it is. Again, there are so many benefits to the ability to cast effectively a free Speak with Dead thing. We already talked about with data analysis the ability to kind of hack targets, but that's only going to give you so much information. And a lot of times, again, and it's going to depend on whether the GM allows you to do that or not. With Postmortem Interrogation, this is something that requires the GM to give you information. And again, for an analyst, information is power. So being able to interrogate something once per scene. So this is not like once per scene per character. If you do take out quite a few different creatures, you do have to kind of pick the one that you're like, okay, this is the one that's going to be the most beneficial to me. Perhaps using Analyze Target to figure out which one is going to be the one that is most useful to you. Again, everything goes back to Analyze Target for this particular role. It's great. And then you get true answers. Like when you use Speak with Dead, which is what this is, effectively it can be unbelievably useful. If you use it the way that most players do, which was highlighted in the D&D movie, it can be a hilarious thing. And it does allow for multiple questions depending on how high you roll. So increasing either your science or technology skill, the higher that skill is, the more likely you're going to get high enough that you can ask multiple questions. And each additional question is another piece of the puzzle. And it could be something, simplistic, like where is the enemy base, but could also be extremely valuable things like, okay, what's the password to get in here? What kind of defenses are used here? What information do you know about our team? If you're playing in a team that's supposed to be covert ops, being able to figure out exactly how much the enemy knows about you can be essential, and can be very, very useful, especially if they know something that is incorrect, or they think they know something and you can manipulate them to thinking that they don't know it. Like, being able to know what your enemy knows is very, very useful. Being able to give your enemy actual false information and have them believe it to be true is significantly more useful. So even something as simple as, if I wanted to send a message to your commander and make it look official so that they think it was from you, what would I do? Those are incredibly useful things to be able to send to the enemy false information that will get them prepared for something that's either not going to happen, or convince them to not be prepared for something that is going to happen. So lots of different uses for postmortem interrogation. Again, it's not tied to a limited resource. It's just once per scene. So a lot of use out of that if you're smart. Moving on. At 13th level, you get Target Breakdown. 13th level, you can spend a number of free actions equal to the number of times you've used Analyze Target on a target to give an ally upshift on an attack against that target equal to that number. This is worded kind of poorly, but effectively, you can use aim for other characters. Now, this isn't the aim skill, so it doesn't interact with Pinpoint, but every time you analyze a target, so again, we go back to quick study, you use both your move and your standard to analyze a target twice. You can then use up to 2 free actions to give an ally 2 upshifts to attacking that target. And so this is where your understanding of how the rest of your team works really comes into play. Because, again, you can only use one-handed weapons or effectively versatile weapons. And because your character is really built around ranged combat, more likely than not, you're going to be using sidearms and similar things to that. Things that are not really designed for damage. However, you might have a gunner, or you might have a warrior on your team that just does crazy amounts of damage, and giving them those upshifts can be the difference between them, either hitting and barely doing anything, or missing entirely, and getting a crit and doing massive amounts of damage. Now, it does specifically state on an attack. So this is only on one attack. This is not a permanent thing. But because it says you can spend a number of free actions equal to the number of times you use Analyze Target on a target to give an ally upshift on an attack against the target equal to that number, that means if it's a ranged character, you can use target breakdown to give them upshifts, and then they can use aims to give them even more upshifts, maybe even getting to the point where they get an automatic hit or an automatic critical, doing really, really great things. So the biggest thing that you have to focus on is making sure you know who is going to get the best benefit out of this. This is exclusively on attacks. So you can't use this to make it easier for them to sneak behind someone or something. But if you know your team well, you'll know who's going to get the best bang out of their buck for this. And again, you get to make that decision of, is it more beneficial for me to analyze the target and help my ally? Is it better for me to analyze the target and help myself out? The nice thing about target breakdown is it does mean that anytime you use your standard action to use Analyze Target, your free actions aren't going to go to waste if you normally use them for aiming to make your shots more accurate. It means that even if you have already used your standard action for something else, anything else, as long as you've used Analyze Target on anything, you can burn a free action to help an ally. So it just really increases the ability of your character to make good choices about how to use your standard action, how to use your move action. And yeah, so again, as much as it seems very, very simple, it massively expands how you can play this character. And depending on the general perks that you take to build this character, you may change your change your analyst into a pure support character where they use their action to heal and buff and things like that, while they use their move to analyze, and then they use their free actions to target breakdown, and create a really, really cool, interesting character that way. Or you can realize that because your analyzed target already gives you upshifts to the attack, you can use your target breakdown. Instead of using aims for yourself, you can use your target breakdown to help an ally also get effectively the same benefit. So again, it just massively expands how you can use your character. Moving on. At 14th level, you get Psychoanalyst. At 14th level is a standard action. You can roll a science or technology skill test against the willpower or cleverness of a target who can hear you. On a success, the target suffers a stun 2 effect. This is really, really nice. And again, when we look at the analyze target, quick study, and everything else that you do, the stun effect was really poorly explained in the Power Rangers RPG. It's explained much better in the Transformers RPG. And just to make things easier, I'm actually going to read how it works. I just have to get to the right thing. Speed ST stun. Of course, they don't actually have it in here. Maybe under damage. I'm in the index right now, by the way. Just go to damage types and see if it's in there. Damage, acid, blunt, shock. Really, I can't find how stunning works. I've read it a dozen times. Effectively, I'm not going to look for it anymore because this is just annoying the hell out of me that I can't figure out which part of the book it's in. Anyway, it's one of my one problem with or one of my big problems with the Essence20 system is they will explain certain things in one place in the book, and it's not really told where to find that, like where stun damage is defined, and it's not in the index. So if I want to figure out how stun damage works, I have no idea. I just have to keep flipping through the book. That being said, the basic effect of stun damage in general, it means that their next turn they don't get to take an action, but they go down once this is stun level. So stun 2 means for 2 turns they effectively don't get an action. And if their stun level gets up to the same as their hit points, they're defeated. So with a standard action, you get to target defenses that are normally not targetable by weapons with stun effects, which are willpower and cleverness, and you get to add a stun 2 effect. When you combine that with Analyze Target and Quick Study and Target Breakdown, that means on your turn, you can psychoanalyze a target, take it out of combat. Use your move action to analyze a different target, or the same target, using Quick Study to allow you to do that. And then Target Breakdown, you can use a free action to give an ally an upshift on that attack to help them do that. This turns you into a really, really powerful character. Because stun damage, like hit point damage, is nice. Stun damage actually stops the enemy from doing things. It's really, really powerful in the Essence20 system. So, yeah, the ability to just give out stun damage while also being able to use all these other action to the types to still do useful things is really, really nice. So, yeah, super cool. You basically just look at them and go, "You're fat," and they're like, "No, I'm not," and then they can't do anything as they try and deal with their inner demons. Like, I love abilities like that. I think they're really cool. Anyway, moving on. At 16th level, you get just the facts. You become immune to deception skill tests from creatures your level or lower, and resistant to deception skill tests from creatures higher level than you. Now, this in and of itself, I think, is poorly worded, because there isn't a resistant thing in the Essence20 system. You can be resistant to damage types, but deception is not a damage type. So I understand what they're trying to do here, and basically what resistance does to a damage type means if they're trying to attack you with a certain damage type, they have to roll with a snag. Basically, they roll with disadvantage for it. So what this is saying is creatures that are your level or lower can't use a deception skill test against you, and a creature that is a higher level than you has a snag on any deception skill test that they make. If they had worded it that way, it would have made more sense. Because they worded it the way that they did and tried to use resistant in a way that's not really defined in the book, this is just really poorly worded. As far as mechanically how useful it is, again, your mileage may vary. If you're playing a campaign where the GM does try to lie to your characters on a fairly regular basis, you are now a human lie detector. It's unbelievably useful. If you are not dealing with deception a whole lot in your campaign, this is a kind of useless ability. Now, because the word deception is pretty damn close to Decepticon, it would make sense that Decepticons like to lie on a fairly regular basis. How often you're going to deal with that as an analyst is, again, going to be entirely up to the GM. So because of that, this is a slightly less useful thing. But it does mean that a combination of Analyze Target and Just the Facts means that Analyze Target, you can figure out important information. Like maybe the valuable piece of information about them is you recognize which area they normally work in for the Decepticons, and that will allow you to know what questions to ask, and when they lie to you, you'll know that they're lying. Doesn't let you know what the truth is, it just makes it so they can't lie to you. So, again, it's an interesting ability, don't get me wrong. As far as the usefulness, and especially since it's a 16th level ability, that is really, really high, it just feels a little bit out of place. I probably would have liked to see that a little bit lower level, because by the time you're at 16th level, you probably have high enough stats that it's going to be difficult for them to lie to you anyways. So, yeah. Moving on. At 18th level, you get Swift Study. At 18th level, using Analyze Target is a free action. You can use any number of free actions on Analyze Target in a single turn, but you can only target one creature per turn. Now, this one, the wording is really important. For Quick Study, said at 7th level, using Analyze Target is a move action or standard action. Now with Swift Study, it is a free action. So that means you can no longer use your standard action or move action to use Analyze Target. But now it's a free action. And you have so many other things that you can use your standard action, your move action for, that this just really, really expands all the different things that you do. It also means that you definitely want to have a decently high speed score so you get lots of free actions. I'm going to really quick look at the actions here. Standard. Many perks, most common standard action. You can trade in a so here's the other thing. You can always trade in a standard action for 2 free actions, which lets you can also use your standard action to sprint, which lets you use your standard action to move. So standard action can turn into a move action. Your standard action can also turn into 2 free actions. So if you wanted to use your standard action still to use your Analyze Target, you can now do it twice instead of once, just because of how the action economy works. So Swift Study is still very, very useful and gives you a ton of different ways to interact with that. It just means that your free actions are going to be very, very, very valuable to you. But it also means that you can now analyze a target and attack in the same turn while still also moving. And then if you want to use Psychoanalyst, you can. If you want to use Target Breakdown, you can, depending on how many free actions you have. It just really opens up your ability to do a lot of different things. And it also means in non-combat encounters, in social encounters, and exploration encounters, you can use your Swift Study to learn things that are going to help you in other ways as well. This doesn't have to be an exclusively combat ability. Yeah, very, very useful high levels as a skill. Moving on. 2 final thoughts. Overall, I love the Analyst. I have said this many, many times before. I am such a big fan of controller and support type roles. I became a fan of them in when I first started playing 4th edition, and the controller roles in general had so many cool, interesting things that you can do. And the most broken thing that you can do in 4th edition is work together. Teamwork is the most broken ability in all of D&D 4th edition. And I've discovered most tabletop RPGs, if you learn how to work together and you learn how to support the other members of your team, you can get through encounters that you really shouldn't be able to. And the Analyst is built around support and control. They have an instant stun ability. They have the ability to learn information about targets, and then use that information to make it easier for them to hit, to make it easier for their allies to hit. They have the ability to just ignore armor and things like that. There's so many different things that they can do that are useful to them, but are also useful to the rest of the team. And with that determined probability, they basically have do-overs. Where they can go, I'm not 100% certain this is a great idea, so I'm going to determine probability, and then, this is basically, all those people that played Baldur's Gate 3 and then were really, really upset when they couldn't reload their quick save in an actual D&D game. Determined probability is reloading your quick save. It allows you to try literally any skill test and see how it's going to go with no downsides. Because it's just a probability, it's not like, well, I was going to try and like trying to seduce someone and failing or trying to manipulate someone and failing is going to poison your relationship with that person when they realize that you're trying to manipulate them. It's going to determine probability. They never know. They just watch you get silent for a little bit and go, nope, that's not going to work. And then keep going. They might be like, what's not going to work? Then you go, doesn't matter. Let's talk. Like, there's so many interesting, unique things that you can do with this character. And the focus is just make it that much more interesting. Again, we're not going to talk about the focuses here, or foci, if you want to use the right term. But yeah, overall, I think the Analyst, again, it's somewhat unique to the Essence20 system. There really isn't a character in like D&D 5th edition or Pathfinder or any of the Powered by Apocalypse systems that really works like the Analyst. And to me, that is a huge, huge feather in the cap of the Essence20 system, to be able to create a class that feels unique to the Essence20 system, but also make you kind of want it to exist in other systems. I mean, you do have things like the Mastermind Rogue that might kind of do similar things to the Analyst, but it doesn't do them anywhere near as well. So yeah, overall, just a really, really cool class. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, please remember, again, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All these things are super important. In the comments down below. First things first, what are your thoughts on the Analyst? Do you like controller-style classes like this, or would you prefer something that's got a little bit more focus on combat? And can you think of a Transformer or a Power Ranger or a G.I. Joe that you think would exemplify the Analyst class that is not Jazz, Mirage, or Hubcap? Let me know what you guys think would be a definite Analyst role in anything. Even if you want to go into My Little Pony, what do you think the My Little Pony Analyst would be? Anyway, again, is all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.